The German Shepherd didn't just bark. He stood upright on his hind legs in the middle of the lethal Wyoming blizzard, his front paws pressed together in a heartbreaking gesture of prayer that forced Clara Reed to slam on her brakes. "What are you doing, boy? You're going to get killed," she gasped, her FBI badge cold against her chest. But as she followed the dog into the whiteout, she didn't find a lost pet. She found a bleeding police officer slumped over a shattered dashboard, whispering a warning that someone was still watching them from the trees. Before we uncover the chilling conspiracy hidden beneath this frozen mountain, please subscribe to the channel and follow this story to the very end, and comment below with the city you are watching from so I can see how far my story has progressed. The wind didn't just howl, it screamed with a predatory hunger that made the metal of Clara Reed's SUV groan in protest. She was 300 miles away from her office in D.C., officially suspended for insubordination. But she knew the truth. She had stepped on the wrong toes in a high-level corruption case, and now the silence of the Wyoming mountains was the only thing protecting her. "Just get to the cabin, Clara. Don't look back," she muttered, her hands gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles turned the color of the ice outside. Suddenly, her high beams hit a wall of fur. A massive German Shepherd stood dead center in the road, illuminated like a ghost in the swirling snow. She slammed the brakes. The vehicle skidded, a violent shudder passing through the chassis as she stopped inches from the animal. The dog didn't flee. He stood up on his hind legs, paws together, his eyes reflecting the light with a desperation that looked hauntingly human. Are you begging?" she whispered, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She pushed the door open. The cold hit her like a physical blow, a jagged blade of frost that stole the air from her lungs. "Hey, boy, come here. It's too cold for this," she shouted, but the dog turned and vanished into a ravine, pausing only once to look back at her with a mournful whine. The first mini-climax arrived when Clara, ignoring every safety protocol she'd ever learned, stepped off the road and into the waist-deep powder. "I'm coming! Slow down!" she yelled. She followed the dark shape of the dog until she saw the glint of shattered glass and twisted steel at the bottom of the slope. It was a local sheriff's cruiser, upside down and half buried. The blue and red lights were dead, but the smell of leaking gasoline was sharp and terrifying in the crisp air. "Is anyone there?" she screamed, sliding down the embankment, her FBI training overriding the fear of the storm. She reached the driver's side window. A man's hand, bloodied and trembling, was reaching through the jagged opening, clutching a tattered leather holster. Don't use the radio," the man inside gasped. His voice was a wet, rattling sound that made Clara's blood run cold. She pulled him out, a young officer named Leo, his face a mask of bruises and ice. He was clutching his side where a dark, spreading stain revealed a gunshot wound, not an accident injury. "Officer, stay with me. My name is Clara. I'm FBI. I've got you," she said, hoisting his arm over her shoulder, the sheer weight of him threatening to collapse them both into the snow. The major twist hit her like a lightning strike as she dragged him toward the shelter of a nearby rock overhang. She saw the dog, Rex, standing guard, but his ears weren't pointed at the wreck. He was staring up at the road, at the headlights of a second vehicle that had just pulled over exactly where Clara had parked. "They're here to finish it," Leo whispered, his eyes wide with a jagged edge of terror. "Who, Leo? Who did this?" she hissed, pulling him deeper into the shadows of the granite ledge. My own sergeant," he choked out. "He's on the payroll. The camera? Find the dash cam." Clara realized then that she wasn't just a good Samaritan. She was now the only witness to a cold-blooded execution attempt. The dramatic tension peaked as a flashlight beam swept over the edge of the ravine, a long, clinical finger of light searching for survivors. "Reed, I know you're down there." A voice boomed from the road. It was a voice that knew her name, a voice that shouldn't have been in Wyoming. "That's not a local cop," Clara whispered, her mind racing through a list of enemies she'd made in D.C. The hook came when the dog, Rex, let out a low, vibrating growl that felt like a warning from the earth itself. He wasn't just a pet. He was a highly trained K9, and he was staring at the man descending the slope with a suppressed rifle. "Elias?" Clara gasped, recognizing the silhouette of her former partner from the bureau. The betrayal was total. The corruption she thought she had escaped had followed her into the wilderness. "Clara, honey, just give me the officer and the dog, and you can drive away," Elias called out, his voice smooth and terrifyingly reasonable. "You shot a cop, Elias! You're done!" she roared back, even as she checked Leo's pulse. It was fading, a shallow, thready beat against her thumb. She didn't have her service weapon. It was locked in the glove box of her SUV, 50 yards up the hill, and guarded by a traitor. The next mini-climax arrived when Rex suddenly lunged out of the shadows. He didn't attack Elias. He dove into the wreckage of the cruiser, emerging seconds later with a small, glowing memory card in his mouth. "Good boy. Bring it here," she urged. The dog dropped the card into her hand just as a bullet sparked off the rock inches above her head. "Last chance, Clara," Elias shouted, the sound of his boots crunching closer in the snow. She looked at Leo, then at the dog, then at the frozen cliffside behind them. There was no way up, only a narrow, ice-slicked path leading deeper into the Devil's Throat Canyon. "We move or we die, Leo. Can you walk?" she asked, her voice a hard, tactical edge. "I'll crawl if I have to," he groaned, the courage in his eyes matching her own. The cliffhanger peaked as they began their retreat into the pitch-black canyon. The storm was intensifying, a white shroud that hid them from Elias, but also threatened to freeze them where they stood. "Rex, lead the way," she commanded. The dog took off, his black and tan coat blending into the shadows, a silent guide through a frozen hell. The hook for the next hour was the sound of a second snowmobile engine roaring to life on the road above. Elias wasn't alone. He had brought a team. "They don't know this mountain like I do," Leo whispered, his breath coming in ragged puffs. "But they have the thermals." Clara gripped the memory card in her pocket. It was the only thing worth more than their lives, and she knew she'd have to choose between the evidence and the man bleeding out on her shoulder. "We're not losing anyone else today," she vowed to the dark. The ending of the first part was the sight of a thermal drone rising into the night sky like a predatory star, its red eye blinking as it began to sweep the canyon floor. The hunt had begun. The shadow of the drone was a silent reaper circling above the canyon, its red light blinking like a pulse of pure malice against the white shroud of the storm. Clara didn't look up. She didn't need to, for the vibration in Rex's throat told her the predator was closing in. "Keep your head down, Leo. And don't stop moving even if your lungs feel like they're filled with glass," she hissed, her hand steadying the officer as they navigated a narrow ledge that seemed to lead nowhere but down. The first mini-climax hit when a gunshot cracked through the thin air, the bullet striking the granite wall inches from Clara's temple and showering them in icy stone splinters. Elias wasn't just following. He was leading a coordinated hunt, his voice echoing through the wind with a chilling, artificial calm. "You can't hide your heat signatures forever, Clara. The cold is going to do my job for me." Clara's heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs, but her mind remained a cold, tactical machine. She pulled Leo into a shallow crevice, her body acting as a shield against the biting wind. "Why did he flip, Leo? What is on this card that's worth murdering your own partner?" she whispered, her fingers tightening around the memory card in her pocket. Leo's breath was a shallow, rattling ghost in the dark. "It's not just drugs, Clara. It's a list of names. High-level federal witnesses sold to the cartels. Rex was the only one who saw the transaction." The major twist shattered the last of Clara's illusions when Rex suddenly bolted toward a hidden metal hatch buried beneath a layer of ice at the canyon's floor. It wasn't a natural cave. It was an abandoned Cold War-era bunker, a relic of a time when the world was waiting for an end that never came. "Rex, no, it's a dead end!" she cried out, but the dog began frantically digging, his claws tearing through the frozen earth with a desperate, singular purpose. The cliffhanger peaked as the drone lowered its altitude, its spotlight finally locking onto their position with a blinding, clinical glare. Clara saw Elias's silhouette at the top of the ridge, his rifle leveled at them, the red laser dot dancing across Leo's chest. "I'm sorry, Clara. I really am," Elias shouted over the wind. But as he pulled the trigger, Rex didn't hide. He lunged at the hatch, his weight triggering a rusted mechanism that sent the ground beneath them collapsing into the black abyss below. They weren't falling into a trap. They were falling into the mountain's belly, leaving Elias staring at an empty patch of snow as the storm swallowed their screams. "Would you like me to continue with part 3 and reveal the secrets hidden within the bunker, while Elias struggles to find a way down?" The darkness didn't just swallow them. It compressed the air in Clara's lungs as she hit the rusted floor of the bunker with a bone-jarring thud. "Leo, answer me," she gasped, her hands frantically searching the blackness until they brushed against the rough, cold fabric of his tactical jacket. The first mini-climax hit when a low, metallic groan echoed from above. The hatch hadn't just closed, it had locked, sealing them into a tomb of iron and frozen dust. I'm here, Clara. Just tell me the dog is okay." Leo's voice was a ragged whisper, the sound of a man running out of time and blood. Rex answered with a sharp, echoing bark, his paws clicking against the concrete as he moved with a supernatural confidence through the shadows. "He's more than okay, Leo. He's the only reason we're breathing," Clara muttered, fumbling for the emergency light on her tactical belt. The beam flickered to life, cutting through the gloom to reveal a hallway lined with mothballed communications equipment and faded maps of the DC underground. "This isn't just a bunker, Leo. Look at the seals on these crates. This is a federal witness protection relay station," Clara realized, her mind racing through the implications. The major twist shattered the silence when a nearby computer terminal suddenly hummed to life, its green cursor blinking with an invitation that felt like a trap. It didn't ask for a password. It recognized the encrypted memory card still tucked in Clara's pocket, initiating an automatic upload. "Elias didn't just follow me to kill you, Leo. He followed me because this bunker is the only place in Wyoming where that card can be decrypted," she whispered, the horror of her own role in his plan dawning on her. The dramatic tension peaked as a heavy, rhythmic pounding began on the hatch above their heads. Not the sound of a fist, but the rhythmic strike of a thermal breach charge. They're burning their way in, Clara. You have to take the card and go through the ventilation shaft, Leo urged, his hand gripping her wrist with a strength born of desperation. I don't leave partners, Leo. Not in D.C., and not in this god-forsaken hole, she shot back, her eyes burning with a fierce, stubborn light. The hook came when the computer screen flickered, displaying a live video feed from the road above. Elias wasn't alone, and he wasn't just with mercenaries. Clara saw her own bureau chief stepping out of a blacked-out Suburban, his face illuminated by the red glare of the drone. The betrayal wasn't a rogue partner. It was the entire chain of command. Rex, she find us another way out. Now, Clara commanded. The dog lunged toward a heavy steel door at the back of the room, his body coiled like a spring. The cliffhanger peaked as the ceiling groaned, a shower of sparks raining down as the thermal charge finally ate through the outer seal. Clara, if we don't make it, tell them what happened to the others, Leo whispered, his eyes closing as the first gust of freezing surface air swirled into the room. She didn't answer. She just gripped her axe and stood between the dying man and the opening door, her heart a drumbeat of war in the dark. Every second was a choice between the truth and their lives, and the clock was screaming toward zero. The thermal breach didn't just hiss. It screamed like a dying star, a white-hot jet of fire that turned the bunker's iron ceiling into liquid slag. Leo, if you can't walk, you crawl, but you do not die in this hole. Clara's voice was a jagged rasp as she hauled him toward the ventilation shaft. She wasn't just an agent anymore. She was a shield standing against the weight of a corrupted empire. The first mini-climax hit when the overhead hatch finally groaned and buckled. The heavy iron plate fell with a bone-shattering clang, and the first tactical boot of the hit squad hit the concrete floor before the dust had even settled. Elias, you're stepping into a federal crime you can't walk back from, Clara roared, her hand gripping a rusted heavy-duty fire extinguisher, the only weapon she could find in the dark. Clara, the crime is you surviving the night. The bureau chief already signed the report saying you died in a blizzard accident. Elias's voice was distorted by his gas mask, making him sound like a hollow mechanical monster. Ghost didn't wait for a command. He lunged through the smoke, his teeth sinking into the forearm of a secondary mercenary, the sound of tearing fabric and a panicked scream echoing through the vault. "Good boy, Ghost! Go!" she urged, shoving Leo into the narrow, galvanized steel duct as bullets began to spark off the communications consoles. The major twist shattered the last of Clara's hope when she saw the tablet Elias was carrying. It wasn't just tracking them. It was remotely erasing the encrypted memory card in her pocket via a high-frequency burst. The evidence, it's being wiped, she gasped, her heart plummeting as the card grew warm against her thigh. They weren't just killing them. They were deleting the truth in real time. You think we haven't planned for this? The system protects its own, Reed, Elias shouted, leveling his rifle at the duct where Leo's boots were disappearing. The dramatic tension peaked as Clara didn't flee. She pivoted and hurled the fire extinguisher into the burning thermal breach above, the canister exploding in a blinding cloud of chemical foam and pressure that momentarily blinded the mercenaries. "Move, Leo! Don't you dare stop!" she screamed, scrambling into the shaft just as a hail of gunfire shredded the concrete where she had been standing seconds before. The hook came when the shaft led them not to the surface, but to an auxiliary pump room that was already half flooded with freezing mountain runoff. The water was rising, and the only exit was a submerged intake pipe. I can't swim with this lung, Clara. Leave the card. Leave me, Leo wheezed, his face turning a sickly blue in the dim emergency light. If the card is being wiped, you are the only witness left, Leo. That means you are the evidence now. She shot back, her hands shaking as she tied a buoyancy vest around his chest. The cliffhanger peaked as the sound of the mercenaries' boots echoed inside the metal shaft behind them. They were coming through the vents. Rex, dive! Clara commanded. The dog didn't hesitate, disappearing into the black, churning water of the intake pipe. Clara took a final, deep breath, her eyes locking with Leo's in a silent pact of survival or death. We go together, or we don't go at all. The sound of the ventilation grate being kicked open by Elias was the last thing they heard before the icy water swallowed them whole. The icy water didn't just swallow Clara and Leo. It crushed the breath from their lungs, a liquid tomb that felt like it was forged from the very iron of the mountain. Clara kicked desperately, her fingers clawing through the churning blackness until she felt the rough, sodden fur of Rex's harness. She pulled Leo's dead weight toward the dog, a silent prayer screaming in her mind as the intake pipe spat them out into a freezing, subterranean lake. The first mini-climax hit when Clara breached the surface, gasping for air that tasted like wet stone and ancient rot. She dragged Leo toward a jagged concrete ledge, her muscles screaming in a state of near paralysis. Leo, breathe! You do not get to quit on me now! She roared, her voice echoing off the damp walls as she slammed her palms against his chest, the rhythmic thud, 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 a desperate drumbeat against the silence of the cave. Leo let out a violent, hacking cough, water spraying from his lips as his eyes flickered open, glazed with the onset of severe hypothermia. The card. Is it gone? Rex stood over them, shaking the freezing water from his coat, his amber eyes fixed on the heavy steel door at the top of a rusted staircase. The only way back to the surface world. The card is dead, Leo, but we're not. We are the evidence now, and we're going to walk right through the front door of that bureau office, Clara vowed, her voice hardening into a diamond-sharp point of resolve. The major twist shattered the last of her strength when the steel door above didn't just open. It was blown off its hinges by a precision thermite charge. It wasn't Elias who stepped through the smoke. It was her own father, a retired general she hadn't seen in 5 years, flanked by a squad of soldiers wearing no insignia. Dad? Why are you here? Clara's voice was a fragile whisper, the betrayal reaching a depth she couldn't have imagined in her darkest nightmares. I told you to stop digging, Clara. I told you some secrets are meant to stay buried for the sake of the country, he said, his voice devoid of paternal warmth, a cold, bureaucratic machine in a human skin. He hadn't come to save her. He had come to oversee the final cleanup of the mess his daughter had uncovered. Dramatic tension peaked as Rex let out a low, guttural growl, his hackles rising as he sensed the predatory intent in the room. He didn't care about rank or blood. He only cared about the pack he had chosen. You killed them, didn't you? My team. Leo's partner. You authorized the erasure, Clara realized, the truth hitting her harder than the freezing water ever could. The hook came when the general stepped closer, his hand reaching for a sidearm. I did what was necessary to protect the transition of power. Now hand over the officer and let's end this with some dignity. Clara didn't flinch. She reached into her tactical vest and pulled out the memory card, holding it over the edge of the deep, churning water. The card is already wiped, Dad, but the backup drive is currently uploading from the bunker's secondary server to every news outlet in the state. She lied. Her eyes locked onto his in a high-stakes game of psychological warfare. The second mini-climax erupted as the general's composure fractured. He signaled his men to move in. But Rex was faster, shot a black and tan blur that knocked the lead soldier off the staircase and into the depths below. "Go, Rex! Take Leo! Get out through the service hatch!" Clara screamed, pulling her last tactical flare and striking it, the blinding red light turning the cavern into a scene from hell. She wasn't just an agent anymore. She was a daughter cutting the final tie to a legacy of lies. The cliffhanger peaked as Elias appeared on the balcony above, his rifle leveled at Clara's heart, his finger tightening on the trigger as he realized the game was truly over. "Sorry, Clara. Orders are orders," he whispered. But before he could fire, a secondary explosion rocked the facility. The naval intelligence team she had secretly pinged from the bunker had finally arrived. The major twist of the final hour was the realization that Rex hadn't just been a guide. He was a biological key, his bark frequency calibrated to trigger the facility's emergency lockdown, trapping the conspirators inside their own tomb. Clara watched as the FBI Internal Affairs team swarmed the room, arresting her father and Elias in a whirlwind of black tactical gear and shouted commands. The psychological weight of the victory was a heavy, suffocating shroud. She had saved the truth, but she had lost her family in the process. Leo was loaded onto a medevac chopper, his hand gripping Clara's one last time. "You saved me, Reed. Thank you." "No, Leo, Rex saved us both," she replied, looking at the German shepherd who was sitting quietly by the ambulance, his mission finally complete. The final hook was the sight of the bureau chief being led away in cuffs, his face hidden from the cameras as the world began to wake up to the news of the mountain's dark secrets. Clara stood in the falling snow, her hazel hair matted and her body bruised, but her spirit was finally free from the ghosts of Fallujah and the lies of D.C. She whistled once, a sharp, clear sound that cut through the noise of the sirens and the shouting men. Rex trotted to her side, his tail wagging for the first time since she found him begging in the blizzard. The story didn't end with a medal or a promotion. It ended with a woman and a dog walking away from the ruins of a corrupt empire, toward a horizon where the sun was finally starting to break through the clouds. She had followed a dog into a blizzard to save a stranger, only to discover that the soul she truly needed to rescue was her own.